Today's forum, Champion of Children, 2014 Franklin County Children's Report, is brought to us with support from our sponsors, PNC, RAMA, Puffin Foundation West. We also want to thank National Church Residences for sponsoring all of our June forums, pulling at the roots of poverty. So thank you to all of them. Please also help me thank them. And please help me welcome and thank from one of our sponsors today, PNC, Mike Gonzarowski, Regional President of PNC, to introduce today's program.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. PNC is once again proud to support the mission of the Metropolitan Club to convene forums and conversations around important topics in our community, and we certainly have that happening this afternoon. Today's forum represents a benchmark of sorts in the quest to provide better outcomes and opportunities for our youngest citizens. If we can't make their dreams reachable, ultimately, what does that say about us? Our speakers represent a diversity of backgrounds and experience in working with the youth in our community. Dawn Tyler Lee, Senior Vice President of Community Impact at the United Way of Central Ohio, will host and moderate the forum. She is joined by an excellent supporting cast, including Bill Weiss, Superintendent of Southwestern City Schools, Duane Casares, CEO of Directions for Youth and Families. Did I say that right, Duane? Was it close? Close enough, thank you. With a name like mine, I'm, fairly indifferent. And Ellen Williams, President and CEO of Godman Guild. Dawn, the podium is yours. Let's welcome all of our speakers.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, and welcome to the official release of the 2014 Franklin County Children's Report, How Toxic Stress Threatens Success. I'd like to start with a little bit of housekeeping by thanking the Columbus Metropolitan Club for providing this forum to launch our report and share its findings. I'd also like to thank the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity and community research partners, led by Sharon Davies and Lynette Cook, respectively, for their work on this report and for their ongoing partnership with United Way. We have so many friends of United Way here today who work with us as volunteers, donors, and community partners to improve lives and strengthen our community. Thank you. I would like to also extend a special thanks to all of our Champion of Children partners and patrons for supporting this important work. Without you, it would not be possible. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the past and current members of the United Way Board of Trustees, my United Way colleagues, many of whom are here today, and in particular, Elizabeth Trotman, who serves as the Director of Champion of Children, and a special thank you to United Way President and CEO Janet Jackson for the opportunity to lead this important conversation. At your seat, you'll find a copy of the report's executive summary, and it will also be an insert in this Friday's issue of Business First. So please encourage your family and friends to pick up a copy. Copies of the full report are available in the lobby at the conclusion of today's luncheon. I know you want to dash out there and grab one now, but please contain yourselves and take one after the luncheon. But you can also download a copy of the report from our website at liveunitedcentralohio.org. This is the third year we have produced the Franklin County Children's Report, and each year we focus on a topic that is critical to the educational success of our children. These reports are an important part of Champion of Children's mission to build awareness of education issues, publish research that helps inform investment, and mobilize our community to improve education for all of our children. Last year, we explored the connections between neighborhoods and education. This year, we focus on the devastating effects of trauma and toxic stress on the success of our children. The scarcity caused by poverty creates a constant undercurrent of anxiety that leads to toxic levels of stress. For parents, it is often challenging to get ahead while worrying about whether their families will have enough to eat or a safe place to call home. For children, the stress of poverty makes it much harder for them to concentrate in school and get the education they need to succeed in life. And studies that we cite in our report show that when the stress factors associated with poverty occur early in a child's life, the health effects are dramatic. The risk of heart disease and stroke rise by more than 200%. The chances of becoming an alcoholic increase by 740%. And the odds of attempting suicide grow by more than 1,200%. In the executive summary and also in the full report, we have what we've started to refer to at United Way as the backpack graphic, which masterfully illustrates those stats that I just shared with you and how they weigh our children down. I know we will all agree that no child in our community should face those terrible odds. While these statistics are devastating, the good news is that we have the collective power to ensure that our children can succeed. The damage from toxic stress can be undone. Children with strong relationships with parents or caregivers and those with support systems of teachers, mentors, and other caring adults are better able to cope with stress. The care they receive helps them develop the resiliency they need to face and overcome the many challenges in their lives. Let me give you just one example of how crucial parent engagement is to every child. In one study we cite in the report, researchers found that they could more reliably predict which students would graduate from high school based on measures of early parent engagement alone than either IQ or achievement test scores. So if we want the next generation of children to succeed in school and in life, we have to invest not only in them, but in the people who care for them. And we have to do it now. The research is clear. The earliest intervention is the strongest and most cost-effective. But even for those children who have already suffered from trauma and the stress of poverty, we must remember it is never too late to help put them on the right path. And there are anecdotes throughout the report that show how through United Way Investment, our partner agencies have worked with teens and other children to help get them on the right path after experiencing trauma and toxic stress. Relationships have the power to heal, and everything we do to create opportunities for parents and caregivers to build pathways out of poverty helps their children as well. Now it is my pleasure to welcome our distinguished panel to discuss the 2014 Franklin County Children's Report, and they were introduced previously by Mike, and so we'll just move right into the conversation. And I'd like to start with a first question about toxic stress. The report defines toxic stress as prolonged adversity, such as physical or mental abuse, chronic neglect, exposure to violence, or the burden of hardship. Children with toxic stress live much of their lives in fight, flight, fright, or freeze mode. You each have made your life's work serving children and families. How do you see this playing out in your environment, and how does toxic stress affect the children and families you serve? And Duane, we'll start with you.
Okay. Bruce Perry ends up putting together a picture, I think, that really kind of paints it for everybody. If you consider a child's brain, and the brain is one of the few organs that is not developed when you are born, so it is a sponge, and he looks at it like a flower. If you're going to end up stressing a flower, it is going to wilt. If you end up nourishing a flower, it's going to grow. And these are lifelong challenges that people will end up having. and it can imprint a child that they're going to look for survival before they're going to be looking to any type of attachment, because that's a priority. All of us do that. So it really is about connection, it's about developing relationships, it's about healthy environments, it's about nourishing, and it's about decreasing stress, because that's a huge challenge for babies to overcome.
What I'd like to do before I talk about two stories that are very emotional for me is to suggest that when we think about the young people that are characterized in this report, it's a very critical report. We need to understand what's in it, and we need to move forward from that. But I would encourage everybody to realize that we're talking about little human beings. You know, never forget that we're talking about real people, little people, while we're talking about the data. When I found out that I was going to serve on this panel, I had a couple of conversations with some teacher friends of mine, and I just asked them, you know, what are you experiencing in your classroom? And a first grade teacher in Columbus City Schools, not at Wyland Park, but at another school, said that she had a little boy who, when they were, had share time, this is first grade, they had sharing time, and his sharing was that he and his family were moving. And she said, oh really, well why are you moving? And he said, because my mom gets raped. And she doesn't like living there anymore. And in the process of trying to help them, they were moved to a shelter, and then the shelter kicked them out. And so we have a little boy who is just not at all thinking about school or anything related to anything but his own safety and his mom's safety. He was very concerned about his mom. The other story is, at one point in time, we had a program called Positive Alternatives to Youth. Positive Alternatives to Suspension, excuse me. And it was a program that we had in partnership with Columbus City Schools. And one day I had to substitute for the person who was actually running the program. And we were playing Simon Says because we were learning how to follow directions. And one little boy was just not able to do it. And he got very frustrated. And so I asked him if he would like to sit and maybe color or do something else while the rest of the group was finishing the game. And he decided that he didn't want to do that, and it ended up that he was turning over tables and throwing chairs. And I said, okay, well now, we can't do that either. What would you like to do? And he said, I want to kill him. And we took him home, talked to his mom about what was going on, and the way she greeted him at the door was by beating him. So there is a lot that we see each and every day, and it is at critical mode right now.
Dr. Wise?
Well, I think you can tell by the stories that whether it's attendance, grades, relationships, substance abuse, those things are the things that show up on a regular basis in our organizations as we work with these individuals. And I want to capture one of the comments here that it's easy to separate these as something that many of us can't relate to, but I think one of the things that we want to put in context, and I'll just use simple stories because I'm just a simple person and I can't do much else. So, I mean, when it comes to that world, it's when I lost 65 pounds, when I was diagnosed with reactive arthritis in 2004, when my wife decided we were going to stay home with children and start to take graduate work. All three of those had significant changes and impact on my life. When I was losing that weight, all my energy, all my emotions, all my focus everything was about calories. It was about when the arthritis came in, I researched, I did all those things. And when she stayed home, the financial impact. The difference here is most of us, hopefully, have been in stable, predictable, control-oriented areas where we could have some semblance of order and process through that. The situations we're talking about today, and when we talk about this chronic toxic stress, that's not the case. And so how do they effectively rebound? How do we help build the resilience as we go through because of all these behaviors that we see that go hand in hand?
And if I can add to that, the brain of the child really becomes exactly what it's exposed to. So if it's exposed to violence, it's going to respond with violence. So if you want a kind child, you need to treat it with kindness. There's nothing really magical about that. There's just a direct correlation between those types of things. And the kids that we all deal with on a regular basis, how are you going to learn in school when you're in crisis mode? We don't even do that as adults very well. You know, when anyone's angry, I always tell people you're about as dumb as you're possibly going to be when you're angry. That's not the time to make decisions. I mean, that truly is not the time. And we do it as adults. And we have more coping strategies. We have more resiliency tools in our toolbox. The children we're talking about, the little kids that we serve, do not have that capacity. And they're relying on the people in their lives, the adults in their lives, to be healthy and to give them that, or they're going to mimic those dysfunctional behaviors.
And to further illustrate the point that Duane just made, one of the most fascinating graphics in the report are pictures of CT scans. And there's a CT scan of a healthy 3-year-old of his or her brain, and the CT scan of an abused and neglected 3-year-old. And the brain size of the abused and neglected 3-year-old is much smaller than that of the healthy 3-year-old. So please make sure you take a look at that when you get the full report. My next question is about the challenges that parents in poverty face and how a lack of financial and other resources can affect mental resources. Specifically, the report states, when the mind is focused on anxieties, the rent, bills, child care, safe neighborhoods, cognitive resources are depleted, leaving less mental energy and cognitive control to think strategically or consider long-term decisions. So Ellen, you talked about when you took the boy home and his mother's reaction was to beat him. What kind of support do we need to provide to parents and caregivers and the children they're raising?
I think that first of all, we have to assume that most parents want what is best for their children. I think sometimes we default to thinking that because somebody is maybe not performing well as a parent, that they don't have the best interest of their children at heart. So I think that we have to start with that. The second thing would be to, if we're able to, we really need to provide as much one-on-one attention to the parents as possible. Really, one size fits all doesn't work when we're talking about this kind of work. Each parent, each family has their own particular stressors, and so I think that being able to give them, the parents, the caregivers, that kind of attention, and it's not easy, nor is it inexpensive to do that.
And to play off of that, all parents want the best for their child. I think that's one of the things that I've worked on hard with our staff, is to understand that we can't substitute our value of what's best for that parent value, because there's a disconnect at that point. It goes back to the core of the question is, if it's about affirmation, it's about infrastructure in order to support those decisions, and it's about the helping folks understand the thought processes, and there are truly options. Phone call 3 weeks ago from a mom, her daughter cut school, went out and went across the street and got a hamburger. Okay, she was hungry, I get it. She took off second period, and they gave her Saturday school where you got to come in for a couple hours and make it up on Saturday. Mom's screaming at me on the phone, very colorfully explaining her point of view. And at the end of the day, I stopped her. I said, Mom, you're lying. Your daughter was in. She said she cut school. No, you misunderstood. No, we didn't misunderstand. She said she went and got a sausage muffin with an egg. I got it. It's an Nard. And so, but the long and short of it was, it took a long time to work through that conversation. Mom didn't have transportation to get her to Saturday school and knew she'd be suspended if she wasn't there. The conversation was, look, Mom, if I can push this off and make it next Tuesday after school, how about if we go Tuesday and Thursday and do equal time? Well, I work Tuesday. What about Wednesday? Okay. Wednesday and Thursday work for you? Yeah. Got her there. It was fine. But her issue of her dynamics in her household created a response. And I'm sure daughter sees that reaction on a regular basis of, we just escalate from 0 to 100 in no time and don't try to problem solve because it's an issue for me. So.
How can caring adults impact children from impoverished environments and or children experiencing toxic stress? What are some examples of how you've seen this in the work that you each do?
Well, there's a couple pieces. We talked about Dr. Perry's work. One of the components is this theory that essentially the brain develops from the brainstem up, and the idea becoming where children are exposed to trauma early in their life, we need to revert to that level and not talk to them at a cognitive level, cognitive processing. It's trying to rationalize with somebody who's rational. That's not the right place to start in the conversation. In the same ways that all of us de-escalate ourselves from, I just need 5 minutes to take a walk, fine, go out, take 2 laps around the track, we'll come back. Do some type of stretching. There's a lot of work with crossing hemispheres. We literally have children who can't take their right hand and cross it over the center line of their body to the left side. And making those connections for children so that the parts of the brain can start to talk to each other and they can move through are some of the things we're talking about here from the standpoint of step back, de-escalate, deal with it, even a rocking motion. Think how soothing many of a rocking motion is. I mean, we've got students that we put on, I would have called it a hippity hop without ears as a kid. Those little exercise balls, I guess, is what they refer to them. We have students that's what they sit on all day. And that rocking motion can go a long way to keeping them soothed at a point where they're better able to deal with the situation. And then it's the things we've always talked about, informing them of their choices, reaching through. But the pieces that are that framework for us that we pick out that I think the report captures so well, it's about stability, it's about predictability, it's about the power that I have to choose controlling an outcome. And that's what we want to reinforce over and over again.
And it's about hiring those people who understand that. We have to pay particular attention to the staff that are working in our organizations, in our schools, making sure that they understand what children go through when they're exposed to toxic stress. Because it's it's not unusual, but it's not something that everybody has to deal with all the time. And I really think that that's one of the basic places that we can start, really, the people that we are assigning to work with those children.
To follow up on that point, Ellen and Dr. Wise and Duane, are there trainings or professional development in this new field of work that's available for teachers and other people who work with children?
Well, yeah, I think as Bill mentioned, Dr. Perry's work is getting, an awful lot of attention, and it's great that it is as well, just because it is combining the medical field from the behavioral health field. Out of Case Western, they're doing an awful lot of work out of resiliency, and they're connecting that with the whole trauma thing. The whole ACE test is being tested nationally. It's being modified so that we can be better about addressing trauma. It's not as if you're exposed to trauma, this is going to be a lifelong event. It's going to be a challenge, but your cortex really develops neurons throughout your life. So in a sense, you have the capacity and ability to rewire. This is the whole capacity to heal. But it doesn't just happen out of knowledge. If it happened out of knowledge, all of our jobs would be easier. It's the cognitive, it's the emotional, it's the behavioral, and then it's the fourth dimension that many people feel nervous about talking about sometimes, it's the spiritual. So it's how you think, how you feel, and how you act. So there's just not one approach. And what Ellen said before was really extremely important. We deal with individuals, not objects. So all of these things really have to be modified to the individual. Walking in and out of people's lives is serious business, and far be it for anyone in the helping profession to create more damage than was already there when they walked through our doors. And that's why we have to treat them as individuals and not objects. And that's why we have to start where they're at without any value, without any challenge of their belief system. It's starting with them as human beings. And that's just an important component.
And I think you've captured it very well. I once heard a colleague make the comment of, well, they're just looking for excuses and they're lazy. And the end result, or the response to the colleague was, are you sure you're just not afraid to try because you're going to fail? I think that happens with a lot of this, and there's not a whole lot of magic, and there's not a lot of magic bullets, but you can talk about prenatal components here to reduce stress during the pregnancy and the impact that has. You can go through all of those various components. But it goes back to something Ellen said earlier as well, is you got to believe they want the best, and you got to believe that you're working from a position to empower them to make that happen.
So in the report, there are issues that are discussed like neighborhood violence, family structure, food insecurity, parental incarceration, educational access, just as some of the stressors that our children face. It's very easy to get overwhelmed when you think about all these different components of children and families that need to be addressed. How do you, as people who are working with young people day in and day out, not get overwhelmed and start tackling some of these issues?
Well, I actually left the Guild for the very first time back in 2000 and some, for a personal reason, but also because I had just had enough. Right before then, we had a mom with 3 little babies who came to the Guild. They were barely toddlers, and they were homeless. And they had been at every shelter in Columbus. They weren't allowed back at those shelters because they had issues as a family, but we couldn't find any place for them to go. And for me, that was overwhelming. I wanted to take them home with me, but of course we can't do that. But there are lots of cases out there like that I think cause a lot of toxic stress on people who work with families, quite a bit like that. And so, being able to have the kinds of supports for staff that keep them in a place where they can deliver the kind of service and provide the support that those families need is also very critical.
You can almost even liken it to all of your jobs. Everybody can be in stressful situations regardless of what you're doing, but you're going to have to separate the personal from the professional, or you're not going to last very long, and then you're not going to be capable to help anyone. Professional boundaries are there not only to protect the people that we serve, and I believe we are public servants, so we are there to serve them, but it's also to protect the workers so that they are not being drawn in. When we get into positions where you're trying to rescue people, or you're enabling them, or you're fostering dependency, these are boundary issues. And it's not, actually, not only is it not good practice, it's also not going to be in the best interest of the person you're working with. So we always have to monitor those types of things.
No CMC forum is complete without questions from the audience. In just a moment, I will be turning my attention to audience questions, so please start making your way to the mic. And while you're doing that, as you think about the current policy environment, do our policies support efforts to address the stress and trauma facing children in our community? And if not, what kinds of policy changes could help?
Well, I'll take a stab at a couple, probably more education related specifically than anything else. The focus on early childhood education needs to increase. I mean, there's been some good efforts in that area. One of the Columbus Kids Project was recently expanded with the help of the commissioners to Franklin County Kids for Identification and Support of Families. It's a great step in the right direction, but a great deal of work needs to be done there. The other area that's not talked about much, that's pretty significant at this point, is the homeless issue. We've seen such a dramatic increase in that. I was serving, at least by definition, 8 students that were homeless in 2009. I was over 140 this year. The issue, part of that issue also is once they're declared homeless, they return back to school regardless of where they are. So if you know where some of my schools down around in the southwest portion, I had one student who was in 7 different places as he was homeless throughout the year, one as far away as Reynoldsburg. And we're trying to get transportation up to Reynoldsburg, back to school, back to Reynoldsburg every day. And we showed up one day and they're gone. I mean, it took us a week to figure out where we were homeless next. And so the logistics of that, the cost of that, the impact of the child are pretty significant. The other one that is specific to me, and I'll keep it within a traditional K-12 context, but you may be able to make it broader, is the idea of magnet schools or open enrollment and how that impacts. I'm struggling with, from a policy perspective, what makes sense, because what we see is informed parents make choices to move their children to other schools, and then it leaves a school with a void of resources at that local neighborhood center, only to have that child then return back to the same neighborhood and spend his evenings and weekends. I'm struggling with that concept of whether that's a good policy decision or not at this point, Because what we see is, and we actually track the data, and I'll give you a parallel. In Southwestern, the last time we looked, 87% of the folks that left us for charters went to a lower performing charter school than the building they were assigned to. Okay. I'm struggling with, from a conceptual standpoint, I get choice, I believe in quality education for all. That's not the conversation I'm trying to have with you. But this magnet conversation, this introduced, I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'm not sure the policies are in the right place. So those would be my three.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to echo this comment and really reinforce the need to work with young people who are homeless, not only from the aspect of the stress that's caused by them being homeless, but also by the lack of continued educational support. They're not getting that, and they're falling further behind, and that's adding to the stress. So, you know, how we work with young people that are homeless, those that aren't in shelters, that they could be on the street, or couch surfing, I think it's called by some people, house surfing. We really need to pay attention to those young people.
Thank you. We'd like to now move to audience questions, and we'd like to ask those at the microphone to please state your name and avoid making editorial comments, and please start with your question.
I could state my name. It's Java Kittrick. I'm director of the Puffin Foundation, and I think a lot of the findings in your report were kind of self-evident that they would be there, especially coming out of the recession or depression that really impacted the children the most in our community. And my question is really for other not-for-profits and corporations who either withdrew or withheld funding during the recession years because they were trying to protect their own corpus or the money that they were also perhaps losing in the market. And what have you learned from the recession now that you know that it has such a severe impact on the children of our community? Thank you.
Great question.
Question for us?
Oh, well, okay. Well, certainly, as one of our panelists indicated, I think maybe it was Dr. Wise, one thing that we know through our work at United Way is that the investment in early childhood education is just so critical. And so the majority of United Way's resources are focused in our education impact area as a result of what we know. We have positioned the research that we do through the Franklin County Children's Report and through the Champion of Children to really be research that can inform how we make our investments. And so that's why we want to make sure that information in this report and in other research that we do really help shape the limited resources that we're able to invest in the community so that we can have the greatest return on investment. We absolutely spend our resources wisely. I can say that without hesitation. We have an accountability team that makes sure that the donor dollars that are being invested into programs that are funded by United Way are being used in the best possible way. So thank you for those comments. Rebecca, I'm sorry.
Hi.
Oh, before you go, Rebecca, Ellen?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that a lot of nonprofits at least in this area, in my conversations with other executive directors and CEOs, they are paying particular attention to how they accumulate reserves so that they can weather those kinds of storms. And I think continued support from organizations like United Way and other corporations to help us do that is really critical.
Now, Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca Asmo with Boys and Girls Clubs of Columbus. I really appreciate how this report has helped to spotlight the increasing problem of poverty in this community, but also really bring to light the experience of what it's like to be a child living in poverty. Are there communities that have been successful in, really reversing, the upward trend of poverty that we're seeing in this country? And if so, what are some strategies that they've employed that have been successful?
Thank you.
I mean, one of the biggest examples, I think you can look at the transformation in the Wyland Park area. We've been involved with that collaborative, so with Ellen as well, and the project that we're in is also working with the Columbus Police Department Ohio State's actually doing the research for us. We have juvenile court involved, and it really is to start to address not only the issues that you have in Wyland Park, and that it is changing, but also the way that we end up dealing with it. We have a neighborhood options for youth program that instead of arresting kids all the time, because that's what happens, they get in trouble, you arrest them, you throw them down in DH, and a couple of days later they're back out in the street. We're giving them an alternative to that. So the Columbus Police are allowing them to avoid being arrested if they will agree to engage in services. And when we end up getting those referrals, we don't just engage that individual, we want to engage the entire family and all siblings or anybody else who lives in that household. It's so that we're not just shoving the problems around, we're actually dealing with them where they are. And I think that as long as we keep pushing ourselves, and Columbus Foundation has been such a huge supporter of this, of pulling us all together, as well as CPO, pushing the bar of how we used to deal with things traditionally isn't necessarily how we have to continue to do that. And we can do it in a better, more effective way and better serve the people who are living in those communities without pushing them somewhere else. And I think that that's just smart for all of us, and it's better money spent that we are doing this as a collaborative group of people.
It is about bringing all of the forces to bear of the different entities within those communities on various specific problems. And I think we're doing that very well at Wyland Park.
And as we talk about utilizing research to inform our decisions, another great tool is the benchmarking report that Community Research Partners issues every couple of years. And we can look at our peer cities and see where they might be rating higher than Columbus and take some learnings away from that as well.
Yeah, another one too that I should mention too is the whole South Gateway project. We're not involved with that. I know Rebecca, you guys are. And I think it's just another one of these models that we're looking at that I think is going to help change how we end up moving forward.
Mr. Wright?
Good afternoon. Mo Wright, Raymond Consultant. Wanted to build on an earlier point, which is I'm fortunate to serve as a commissioner for Columbus Recreation and Parks. And as you know, we all are kind of sister organizations working to ensure the best environment. As we go through our master planning process, and our director, McNaught, is here as well, what would you put on our minds as the city's recreation and park system to be thinking about to support you in this work, and how might we partner better as we think about our work for the future?
Well, I know for sure that in Wyland Park, there is really no place for young people, especially older youth, to be and to feel a sense of ownership. The kinds of activities that they like to be involved in are a little bit scarce. And I just think partnering with those organizations that reside in those urban core communities that need that kind of assistance in terms of places to be, the equipment, the staff to kind of mentor, especially some of the young men, is an area that we could really look to collaborate more on.
And I think there's an open dialogue and conversation to be had from a variety of venues, but I think this whole idea, and I think it's even mentioned in the report about structured play for children and how important play is, especially at a young age. But there are lots of organizations. What sometimes is missing is the right convener to have that conversation. For example, if you've got the space, Columbus Children's Hunger Alliance might have the food, the YMCA might have the educational component. There are lots of opportunities to get the right players together at the table. That's when we've actually found the greatest success around this, is when it's really a regional collaborative effort in order to say who can bring what to the table and how. And unfortunately, many times we live in our silos or we're within our neighborhoods and don't see that larger opportunity. And that's where United Way and other organizations are really key to make sure that there is a convener in the room. So I would think all of our organizations are open to meet and talk anytime about opportunities.
Dr. Weiss, thank you for mentioning the statement about unstructured play. It's one that really stood out for me, and I just flipped to it in the report. Research also shows that unstructured time for play is particularly important to the development of empathy and healthy brain development, and that poor children who have less structured activities are actually more reliant and caring, self-reliant and caring. That really stood out for me. Our next question.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Shirley Billings. I'm a former school superintendent, which is what brings me here today. Of course, I'm not now with school systems, so some of my comments might be a little bit dated, but it occurred to me that some years ago, we were talking about success by 6. Some of you may be familiar with that. My question to the panel is, to what extent do your organizations provide early interventions that would attempt to achieve that success by 6?
Well, and I think the first step in that whole conversation is identification. Especially for children before the age of 3, we struggle with identification. And so I don't know if we're very good as a community. Once the identification process begins, I think there are some resources that we're starting to do that work a little bit better. But also, if I have to answer the question directly as possible, the further you get from the center of our great city and you move farther out, the fewer resources there are, especially around quality childcare programs, and especially if you're looking on a sliding scale. You move into my neighborhood and you move farther out West Broad Street, the opportunities aren't there. It's home-based care, and many of those folks haven't been trained or are very limited trained, and so when they provide unstructured opportunities or play opportunities, the educational components aren't there and the referrals aren't there for parents to gain assistance when there is a significant delay, because that's part of the information process that needs to happen as well, is referrals when there is a significant delay. So I think we've gotten better, and there's some structures, but what I think that we need to capture a little bit is a significant portion of this population is really in our suburbs, and the programming and assets don't follow necessarily, and that can be a significant limitation. So we've gotten better, not as good as we need to be. It would be my answer.
I would say the Guild has been working with young people since 1898. And one of the things that I am most proud of is a program that is funded in great part by the United Way. It's our after-school program at Wineland Park. But it's more than that. We actually work with the teachers in the classroom during the day, make the connection to the after-school program, and then also make the connection to summer programming. Continuing that academic support, but also allowing them to be out at beautiful Camp Mary Orton and just having a ball, just being a kid, which is what we like to say. And this is just a place for them to be a kid, just let go and have fun. So I think that's one of the things that we are doing in order to help ensure their success.
And there's several organizations that have kindergarten readiness programs. We have one as well. And these work best working in an outreach model. We have to go to their homes. We have to be where they're at. The barriers of transportation and childcare are just too difficult to expect people to come to agencies to end up getting services anymore. So I think that that's critically important. We still have, many teens that are having babies. So when you have a teen mom, those types of parenting stressors are totally different. So we have a couple parenting programs. Some of them are specifically tailored for teen moms, but we also have them just for traditional parents. It's not just teen moms who struggle with babies, and it's a full, a broad range of different perceptions of what people think that babies are capable of doing. And some things that you and I may take for granted just aren't realities with some of the environments that we walk into. So.
The other thing I'll add from United Way's perspective is the work that we're doing around kindergarten readiness with our Columbus Kids and Franklin County Kids programs. And for those who might not be familiar, those are programs that help prepare young people for kindergarten, specifically 2.5 to 4-year-olds. And we just reviewed a report yesterday that indicated that we've conducted 18,000 learning checkups within that age group since Columbus Kids started 4 years ago. And so through the checkups, we can identify if children are not on target to be ready for kindergarten and make the appropriate referrals so that work can be done before their first day of kindergarten. We're very proud of that work and the community partners that are involved with us in Columbus Kids and Franklin County Kids.
I want to thank the panel again, and particularly say thanks for that remark regarding the identification of these youngsters in the womb when teenagers are pregnant. I think that is the point of intervention, and if we're really serious about making a change and having children achieve some success, not only are we going to force our efforts at that level, concentrate our efforts at that level, surround those families, whatever they may look like, with as many resources as are available. And in that regard, we have some chance, I hope, of seeing more success and fewer of these toxic stress situations. Again, thank you very much, panel.
Thank you. And as Pam makes her way to the microphone, I'll also add the report does talk about in some detail the importance of prenatal care for moms, because we know that the care starts, as you stated, in the womb. Pam McCarthy.
Hi, Dawn.
Hi, Pam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pam McCarthy with Central Community House, and I'd like to say that we have a very big boat that we are all on, and that boat's being hard to turn. I agree with a lot of the comments. I'm not surprised about the results of the report. I'm appreciative for the report. I do think on this very big ship, you know, it's hard to meet everybody on that ship. Oh, I'm using these little, what do you call them? Thank you. Metaphor. But I do feel the community working at the grassroots level is trying to work smarter, better, partnering, and those kind of things. My concern is this is a very systemic problem. You have many, many systems that are also touched by the poverty, whether it's corporate America, philanthropy, you have a school system, you have school systems, you have child services, city government, other government involved. That's a lot of people. So my question becomes that I think until these silos are broken down, because we're all so busy trying to do this work, that until the systems come together and talk, and then the systems have to talk with, not to, but with providers at that level. So how do we take all this and bring about more systemic change that, in my mind's eye, will make all the difference in the world?
Thank you, Pam. Who would like to tackle that?
Well, on May the 29th, the Godman Guild hosted a forum, and the title of that forum was Social Innovation and the Role of Nonprofits in Helping to Build a Sustainable Columbus Community. And one of the things that we wanted to convey through that panel discussion was that we do need, I don't know if the collaboration is the word, but there needs to be a different way for all of us to work together to really see a difference in some of these systems. Otherwise, we're going to continue to be in our silos, and we will make some good headway with some families and some individuals, but I doubt that we will see systems change until we start to look at it differently and act differently.
I think the words are collective impact that you might be looking for, Ellen. Collective impact.
Yes.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
We have time for this last question from Kathy.
Good afternoon. Kathy Lowry, Director of Community Outreach for the Ohio National Guard. This has been very sobering conversation this afternoon, and I just thought with this elite audience of community caregivers, I should bring up this concept. Some of the literature that I'm reading is talking about how we may anticipate a looming public health care crisis because of all the warriors that are coming back from war injured. It could be a looming public health care crisis. There are millions of caregivers caring for those wounded warriors. I'm wondering how that's going to impact on stress for children. And, you know, I don't know its relevance or prevalence here in the Columbus community, but I wanted to make everybody aware that I'm starting to see literature about that. And if we had more time, I'd love to hear if you have been seeing any, you know, have seen any concerns, you know, related to the military population. But if you would, ladies and gentlemen, please just be aware of that. Our soldiers and airmen, Marines are surviving more and more and more from combat. That's a good news story. But are we really prepared to care for them when they get home? Please wrap your arms around that population. Sorry, it's not really a question, but.
Kathy, thank you for raising that very important point. And as I close, before I turn the podium back over to Emmett, let me just share these words from civil rights leader Benjamin Mays and former president of Morehouse College. We have only just 1 minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it, didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it, give account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. Time is running out for us to change the course of children and families in our community, but together we can do it with our collective investment of time and resources. Future generations are depending on us now. Won't you join us? Thank you.
Well, like all of our forums here in this series, Pulling at the Roots of Poverty, I think you can take a lot of things away from today. So hope you enjoyed today's forum. We encourage you to continue the conversation, lobby over coffee and cookies, and also make a note. I think some of our speakers mentioned Dr. Bruce Perry and his work and on brain development and ability to learn. And back in April, if you go to our website, you can see Dr. Perry's speech that he gave and the forum that we had. Remember that you can view all of our forums on Columbus TV Channel 3. And when I have insomnia, which is almost every night, I'm watching all of it. Statewide on WOSU through the Ohio channel, and anytime on CMC's website. I know I'm in trouble, Jane. I didn't mean that. Once more, thanks to our sponsors, PNC, RAMA, Puffin Foundation West, and National Church Residences for their support, and thanks to our speakers, moderating Don Tyler Lee, thank you, Bill Wise, thank you, Duane Casares, and Ellen Moss-Williams, and thank you to all of you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you at the next CMC Forum.